This is Dr. Don Eddy with Terrible Schools. There are many reasons that the quality of schools is just terrible. Some would say that critical race theory is a divisive mechanism that serves an agenda that proposes that white people are inherently evil and that everyone else is a victim of the oppression inflicted by a racist system. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, critical race theory, or CRT, is the view that the law and legal institutions are inherently racist and that race itself, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is a socially constructed concept that is used by white people to further their economic and political interests at the expense of people of color. One of the major flaws of CRT is that it redefines racism from people who have a belief that one racial group is inherently superior while others are inferior to a belief that all social institutions are themselves racist. CRT also makes the assumption that all white people are complicit in racism because they benefit from a racist system.
Then these people who didn't have what we had, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people.
Right.
They had to be savages. They had to be barbaric. Because they're in these Nordic mountains. They're in these rough, torrential environments. So they're acting as animals.
Right.
So they're the ones that are actually closer to animals.
The philosophy of what Nick Cannon spoke of is rooted in CRT. As an example of what CRT training looks like in practice, Ashley Shackelford would describe exactly what you need to know.
White people are racist. So I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears and what that looks like. We're not going to discuss, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human, like that actually, instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized on rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons. So in this particular way, white people are all racist.
Some may be in disbelief that these ideas are taught in schools. I will provide evidence of a school district that injects CRT under the guise of safety training. Upon first inspection, many of the topics seem quite relevant to the subject of school safety. Although not covered in this video, trauma-informed care is another crutch that suggests that children who have experienced trauma shouldn't be punished for their actions simply because it causes more trauma. As I move through the list, notice the topics that seem to stand out as not relevant to school safety. To illustrate further, I will play a sample of CRT doctrine that teachers are expected to incorporate in their classrooms.
While the educator workforce has gradually diversified over time, the majority of teachers in the United States are white. However, approximately half of public school students are students of color. This demographic difference can lead to culturally influenced perceptions of student behavior. Research has shown that students who are suspended often differ from their teachers in terms of race or gender. Also, research has shown that when black and white students are rated on classroom behavior, black students are rated as, quote, poorer classroom citizens than their white peers. However, when black and white students are taught by teachers of the same race, black students' classroom behavior is viewed more favorably than white students. Cultural differences between students and teachers may activate teachers' implicit racial biases. Similarly, a student's culture can affect how they engage in the classroom. In addition to cultural mismatch, the pervasive implicit associations related to black students impacts how they are perceived. While implicit racial bias affects all genders, research shows that black males are stereotyped with negative traits like aggression, violence, and criminality. These pervasive cultural narratives and media portrayals perpetuate stereotypes and further the negative association of black males. For example, research shows that black boys are often perceived as being older than they are, and this may impact how, quote, innocent or childlike others perceive them to be. This can greatly influence how others perceive the behavior of black youth. For example, if black boys are just horsing around on the playground, their behavior can be implicitly construed as something more hostile, like fighting. These implicit associations can affect how educators view the behavior of black boys, especially in subjective or ambiguous situations. Implicit bias can turn even our best intentions into unwanted outcomes.
Did you pay close attention to how the training placed the responsibility of being culturally aware solely on the shoulders of white teachers? Although they briefly mentioned that a student's culture itself can affect how they engage in the classroom, they failed to mention that black students who bring their own brand of racism toward white teachers can shift the classroom dynamic. The training also fails to mention the component of black culture that believes that success equates to whiteness. Black students who speak with proper diction and tonality are said to be talking white. They fail to mention the aspect of black culture that doesn't respect education as a virtue. Why does CRT ignore these self-destructive culture traits which negatively affect achievement? Because CRT places racial blame squarely with white people, it excuses racism perpetrated against white people by blacks. It is also disingenuous to suggest that the world is composed only of white people and people of color. They amalgamate numerous ethnicities and cultures under this banner, which doesn't survive when held under scrutiny. Asians are disproportionately not suspended or expelled compared to white students. If we believe, as CRT would suggest, that all systems are inherently racist, how is it that Asian students find a way to achieve while black students are overrepresented in disciplinary action? If the system itself is racist, why and how did it skip Asians? The CRT training also mentions how teachers are disproportionately white and suggests that is a primary contributing factor to black discipline, but they conveniently ignore the gender difference that white women are the majority in the teaching profession. So then, is it possible that black boys are then being disciplined based on their gender and not race? CRT ignores this obvious question as it doesn't fit the agenda they wish to inject into our kids. I would make the argument that this training is dangerous propaganda that further harms the black community. CRT assumes that the reason black students are disproportionately disciplined in school is because of racism. CRT fails to account for the cultural elements that gravitate toward crime and a lifestyle of sin and debauchery. CRT suggests that instead of offering discipline to the kids who need it, discipline should be meted out on a racial basis. If black kids are not disciplined for their misbehavior as kids, they will surely be disciplined by the police when they are adults. I don't believe that rational and critically thinking people would agree that CRT is a philosophy or practice that should be taught in schools. President Trump recently outlined a case against CRT.
Critical race theory is being forced into our children's schools. It's being imposed into workplace trainings, and it's being deployed to rip apart friends, neighbors, and families. A perfect example of critical race theory was recently published by the Smithsonian Institution. This document alleged that concepts such as hard work, rational thinking, and the nuclear family and belief in God were not values that unite all Americans, but were instead aspects of whiteness. This is offensive and outrageous to Americans of every ethnicity, and it's especially harmful to children of minority backgrounds who should be uplifted, not disparaged. Teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse in the truest sense of those words.
CRT is a poison that needs to be eliminated from the school curriculum because it is a philosophy that can't be tested empirically or scientifically, but is accepted as plain fact that white people are oppressors and everyone else is simply oppressed. Again, this is Dr. Don Eddy with Terrible Schools, and I will leave you with this. Why is one child's right to an education more important than another child's right to safety?